I'm Gloria Connor. I am with the Fargo Moorhead Association Realtors Education Committee, and I'm going to be the moderator for today. I want to welcome our panelists. We have with us today from the cities of Fargo, Moorhead, and West Fargo. From the city of Fargo, if you want to just wave your hand when I do your intro, we have Brenda Derrig, PE. She's the city engineer for the city of Fargo. Brenda has worked for the city of Fargo for 28 years and has been the city engineer since 2018. She graduated from North Dakota State University. Along with Brenda is Dan Eberhardt. He's a special assessments coordinator for the city of Fargo. Dan has worked for the city for 25 years and has been the special assessment coordinator since 1997. And he also graduated from NDSU. From the city of West Fargo, we have Tina Fisk. Tina has served as a city administrator for the city of West Fargo since 2015 and previously held a position of finance director for 4 years. Before joining the city of West Fargo, Fisk was a financial analyst with Advanced Engineering and Environmental Services and the auditor for the city of Langdon. She is currently an ex officio member of the City of West Fargo's Economic Development Advisory Committee, member of the West Fargo's Liquor Control Board, as well as a member of the FM Diversion Technical Information and Special Assessment Committee. Fisk holds a Bachelor of Business Administrative degree in accounting from the University of North Dakota. And Tina also has another commitment at about 12:40, so she's going to have to jump off the meeting a little bit early. So if you do have additional questions towards the end regarding West Fargo, you can always direct those to her. We will be sending out the panelists' contact information. From the city of Moorhead, we have Tom Trowbridge. Tom is the assistant city engineer for Moorhead. He grew up on a farm near Comstock, Minnesota, and graduated from Barnesville High School. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree with a minor in Spanish from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus. He spent the first 10 years of his engineering career working for consulting engineering firms, first in St. Paul and then in Detroit Lakes. For the last 17 years, he has been the assistant city engineer for Moorhead. Tom has significant experience in implementing special assessment policies in a variety of communities, including Elk River, Minnetonka, Arden Hills, Prior Lake, Detroit Lakes, Pelican Rapids, Audubon, and Barnesville. In addition to Moorhead, he helped to rewrite the city of Moorhead special assessment policy, and that was adopted in 2005 and the subsequent revisions in 2012. He lives in Detroit Lakes with his wife Heather and 4 children, ages 8 to 13. I want to thank all of our panelists for taking time out of their busy schedule and joining us today. Before we get started, I just have a couple of housekeeping things for the attendees. We had close to 100 attendees sign up, and people jump on and off as we go through this. So prior to today, we sent a list of questions to the panelists so they had some time to prepare. So what we'd like to do is go through those questions with them, get their responses, and hopefully answer a lot of the questions you have as attendees. And if there's any additional questions you have, we'll hopefully have time for a Q&A at the end, and then you can just click on the Q&A and enter your questions, and we'll have them respond. Okay, starting off, and I'm kind of going to do a round robin so we give each panelist an opportunity to answer first to some of the questions. So Brenda and Dan, I'm going to start with you with the first question, and then go to Tina and Tom after that if they have additional information they would like to add. So the first question we sent was if you could just give us a brief history and overview of special assessments in Minnesota and then in North Dakota as well.
In Fargo, we use special assessments for the process of filing out our costing out our projects. We use a front foot, square foot, and a combination of both in our calculations for special assessments. In Fargo, we've used special assessments for over 100 years. So it's not a process that's just been out here for a while. It's been here for a long time. And it's been a very proven process. Throughout my tenure with the city of Fargo and our growth pattern, we've used them extensively. When I started in 1997, we were doing somewhere around 20 projects per year at about $5 to $10 million. In the late 90s, we jumped from 5 to 10 to 20 projects to 35, 40 projects, and we were starting to touch on that $35, $40 million a year in special assessments. I'm controlled by 3 commissioners: Dan Dunn, Steve Bladholm, and Randy Engelstead. They're my commissioners at this time. They control what we do. This North Dakota Century Code is the overseer of what we do. 4022, 4023 of the Century Code dictates what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. Then we're also, by Century Code, mandated to have an infrastructure policy that shows the cost of what we do for each project. And one of our mantras through the Special Assessment Commission is longevity, consistency, and uniformity. And we strive to do that. If we've done it before, we'll do it again because it's a proven process. Do you have anything to add, Brenda?
No, other than, like Dan had said, as we dug into it with the Special Assessment Task Forces, historically, special assessments have been around for about 100 years. We could go back 100 years on our looking at old projects and seeing that they were special assessed. So it's a long time process.
Tina, do you have anything you would like to add? No? Tom?
I would just say that for Minnesota side of it, I don't know exactly how long Moorhead's been doing it, but the statute that authorizes the use of special assessments was passed in 1953. It's been amended many times since then. And really what special assessments are is it's a financing tool for getting public infrastructure installed, and it's at the option of the developer, because for new development anyway, they could either just pay the cost up front and then make it be part of the lot prices, or they can petition to use special assessments, in which case the city finances the infrastructure and then recovers the cost through special assessments. And then as far as what they can be used for, virtually any public improvement. So the statute actually spells out a whole list of things, and it includes streets and utilities, which we all think of, but it also includes things such as street lights, parks and playgrounds, flood control works, plazas, boulevard trees. There's a lot of things we could special assess. Most of these we don't. The city of Moorhead used to use boulevard tree assessments. We actually stopped doing that about 10 years ago. And we have not normally assessed park improvements, for example. I think we've had one development where the developer wanted larger, more established parks to begin with, and they petitioned for a piece of it to be assessed. But, so those are things that really they're options. Otherwise, if we normally pay the cost, they just have to wait until it works in our budget. But those are ways that they can be used.
Thank you. So our next question is, and Tom spoke a little bit about this, each municipality does special assessments differently. How does each of your cities assess properties? So Tina, we'll start with you this time.
Okay, thank you. In the city of West Fargo, it's very similar to Fargo and Moorhead. We do front foot, for streets. We do square foot for stormwater, and then we've got all of our different, same thing with water and sewer lines in the middle of the road. Individual hookups are assessed differently. We also have, we've created some nuances because there are some lots that are really large within the community. And so we have some nuances in ours, which we create what's an equivalent unit. And for us, an equivalent unit is 10,000 square feet. I'm not sure what Fargo or Moorhead use on that. And so if your property is, let's say, 25,000 square feet, You get 2.5 equivalent units when we're working on stormwater projects and things like that. So if the average homeowner with a property under 10,000 square feet is going to get a $500 assessment for the project, if you've got 2.5 equivalent units, you'd get a $1,500 assessment. That's just kind of an example of that. Those are some of the things that we do that are a little bit different. We also have, we put in place for some of our rural neighborhoods that are unplatted, that anything above the first 2 acres is considered 1 equivalent unit. And then after that, every 10,000 square feet goes up to another equivalent unit. And so we give them a little bit of break for the large lots. But otherwise, yeah, that's kind of the basics of it. It's very similar to how the others do it as well.
A follow-up to that is in the different municipalities, they have so much is assessed to the homeowner and they share cost in some of those things. How does West Fargo do that?
Currently, to date, on a new construction, so they call it greenfield, a new development, the city doesn't cost share any of that. That's all on the development. If it's a redevelopment property, in the past, what we've done is on main arterial roads, like let's say a 13th Avenue, Veterans Avenue, Main Avenue, we were putting in $1 million a mile into a project. With our core infrastructure project that's coming up, and through our special assessment committee forums that we had, or not forums, meetings that we had, we also came up with another strategy of how to leverage some of our capital improvement sales tax. We don't receive a lot of sales tax, but the whole purpose of the capital improvement sales tax was to give back and keep special assessments down. And so we're working on a ratio of how we're going to be able to help finance the revitalization projects, the redoing of a large roads, like putting a new water sewer street for homes, so that we don't special assess people in the older core part of town out of their houses. And then what will happen is this will continue so that when the newer parts of town end up having to have items refurbished, this process will already be in place so that they're able to benefit as well.
Thank you. So I guess we'll go on to Tom. So Tom, could you kind of run through the same process for Moorhead with us?
Sure. So in Moorhead, again, like Fargo and West Fargo, if it's a brand new infrastructure for a developing area, that's treated differently than a rehab or a reconstruct of an existing neighborhood. So in a new development, it is expected that the new development cost will get paid by the properties there. So a developer either finances it themselves, which doesn't happen very often, but it has happened occasionally in Moorhead, or they may petition. So our process allows them, there's kind of 3 paths. 1, they can pay it all themselves. 2, they can petition for the city to pay for that infrastructure cost and then assess it to them. Or the third option is it's kind of a hybrid where the developer partially pays some of those costs. For example, sometimes to expedite it, or they may want their own engineer to do it. We'll let them design a project, they pay those bills, and they can do everything kind of up to going out to bids. But if they want us to pay the construction cost, then we have to have the contract, and we'll award the bid, pay that, and assess that. So those are what we've done as options for the developer. And so, and again, the idea is they have asked us to use this process, and that's, and that's why we're doing it. And since most developers do it that way, we assume probably for financing and risk, things like that, that it's favorable to them, that's their preferred method. And then for older parts of town, where we're redoing a street, we use special assessments, and in those cases, I've yet to have the property owners there provide us petitions asking us to redo their street. So that's a case where the city has to take the lead and we can order it without petitions. The process requires a supermajority of our council to support the project in order to proceed. And we hold public hearings and things like that so people have a chance to comment on it. But in those cases, since we don't have a fund that just allows us to pay for all of these things, we have to do bonds. We issue a general obligation bond. And in Minnesota, the statute that authorizes that type of bonding only allows us to use it if we have it backed by the use of special assessments. And at a minimum, we have to assess 20% of what we're bonding. So as a result, when we do those local street projects, we have to assess at least 20%. And to simplify our policy, we wrote the policy in a way that we assess a set dollar amount per front foot. So it doesn't matter what part of the city you live in. It doesn't matter how expensive your project was. If it's a mill and overlay, you'll pay $30 a foot. If it's a reconstruct, you'll pay $105 a foot. Our actual cost is much higher than that, but that dollar amount gets us somewhere over the 20% so that we can bond for the rest. And then the city share, whatever we're not assessing, the city share has to get paid out of the regular city funds, which all property taxpayers are paying taxes on to support that. So a lot of times people will say, well, why everybody uses this road? Other people should pay for it. Well, the answer, technically, everybody is paying for it through the city share. And then the special assessment is just what we need to do to bond for the project.
Thank you. Brenda and Dan?
So the city of Fargo is a lot like Moorhead in Greenfields, where we allow the developer to determine if they would like to finance the project themselves and then have the city take over the infrastructure and the right of way, or if they would like to request the city to design and oversee the installation of infrastructure. So in my career here, I've seen it done twice where the developer has financed their development. Otherwise, the majority of projects have been designed and oversee construction by the city of Fargo. And those costs are 100% special assessed on local and collector roads. Now on new greenfield arterials, we do have a capped assessment. And so there is a front foot capped assessment. And then sales tax monies are used to finance the remainder of the project. So our arterial roads have an arterial band, and you pay for one east-west arterial and one north-south arterial. Do you have anything to add on that? Okay. And then on the reconstruction, we have capped costs on the reconstruction, and we've seen that's a benefit because we can really communicate well to the property owners what those numbers will look like, because by using that capped cost, those numbers don't go up. So when you use percentages, those can fluctuate depending on how that project, how the construction costs come in. And so by using that set fee or set capped cost, then they can see what those numbers will be. And those typically run about 70% is paid by the city and 30% is paid by the property owner, is about how that is running right now. And so we do have line items for each infrastructure item depending on what gets replaced. So we have a capped cost for water main, a capped cost for sewer, and a capped cost for the paving. So I guess that's about all I have.
We're kind of unique in our community, the way we do our new construction, our greenfields, that most generally they are special assessed. Can you give us a little history on that and why we're different than other communities in that way and how that started?
You know, I'd like to tell you how it started, but so I've been here 28 years, and then I did my intern here. So for the last 30 plus years, that's how it's always been. And so I don't know if that's how it just started in Fargo, that the developers just never, because you're right, most municipalities, the developers install the infrastructure and then turn it over to the cities. But in Fargo, it has always been an option to do it financially themselves, or to have the city do the plans and specifications and special assess it. And so yeah, it's been a long-standing practice here at the city, which is much different than other municipalities.
We're kind of the front line when we have people moving to our community, and we're one of the, in this industry, one of the first ones that try to explain it to people when they're moving here. And it's one of the things they have a difficult time understanding is the special assessments on properties. And so the more we can educate them, what would you say to someone moving into the community? And I'm going to go round robin on this. When to explain it to them, what would, from your standpoint, what would you say?
I think, you know, what I like, you know, just like Tom talked about, what I really like is the developers have a choice. You're really paying for that cost. It's just depend on how you pay for it. So when the developers are doing it privately, like the majority of cities, then you're paying it through your loan to buy your house, because those costs are all wrapped into the price of your lot. And so those are the two options of how they're paying for it. I think one of the things that Dan's talked about for me is what's nice is when you do a special assessment project, so you stay in your house for 5 or 10 years and then you sell it, then the next person is contributing into that. Where when you buy it into the lot, you're paying up front and those costs are being paid right away. And so if you do a special assessment process, those special assessments continue with the house also as it moves from owner to owner.
Tom, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think what I would try to stress is people keep talking about the lot value and the specials as if they're different things. The reality is the true lot price is, in a new development, it's the lot value, the lot sale price plus the specials, because that's really one thing. If you compare it to an older part of town where there are no specials, maybe it's a 25-foot lot by 150-foot deep or 50-foot wide, whatever, something that a house is on. Anytime you look at a tax assessed valuation, they'll show you the land value and the building value. And one of those small lots in the old part of town will typically have a land value of $60,000 or something. And compare that in a new subdivision where maybe they're selling the lot for $20,000 and the specials are $40,000. Well, no, it's a $60,000 lot. It's just because two different people financed it, you're paying $40,000 of it to the city and $20,000 to the developer. That's probably a better way to think about it.
Tina, do you have any recommendations?
Generally what I do when I'm trying to explain to somebody that has never heard of special assessments, and they say, well, why do you do that? Why can't the developer just pay all that cost and put it into the lot value? I explain the same things like Tom and Brenda and you guys were talking about, that, you know, we spread ours over 25 years. When you sell your property, the specials stay with the property unless you choose to pay them off, those types of things. But I think the most important thing, some of the most important things I think that come out of it are when a developer goes to build a new subdivision, there's a small handful of developers that are able to afford, go to a bank and be able to get a loan to be able to put in all of that infrastructure, because to a bank the risk is too high. And so if we were to all of a sudden say, we're not going to special assess any greenfields anymore, the developers have to do it, discussions I've had are that you're going to dwindle down the number of people that can actually do that kind of work in the community. And you're also going to take all those other trades that support that in the community, and their jobs could disappear as well, because you're only going to have a couple that are going to come from wherever, and then you run the risk of, you've got this great big developer that comes in, kind of like they do in Arizona and other places, and says, well, here's the 3 houses you can have, pick one, and these are the colors you can have, pick one, and then their people all come in and do the work, and it's done. Where here, we have various contractors that can come in and do the work and know that the city will put in the infrastructure, so they have less risk supposedly, but they do have to have a letter of credit that supports the subdivision that they're putting in for the purpose of special assessments until it's 75% full. The other reason it's a good idea for greenfields to go through a city is that we're able to get lower interest rates, which in the end is cheaper for the homeowner than the average loan. I mean, right now it's at 1.5%, 2.5% on a bond, where that's not necessarily the case when a contractor goes to try and get a loan to put in millions of dollars of infrastructure into an empty field.
Thank you. The next question I have is, municipalities are able to get state and local funding to put in the infrastructure. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the funding that you do get, and in particular in North Dakota, the Prairie Dog Bill was passed last year, and if you've been awarded any funds and how you plan to utilize those. So Tina, why don't we start it off with you?
Okay, there are state revolving loan funds that help with water projects, things like that. We can get low interest loans through the state to help pay for city projects like a main road or whatever. But there really isn't any funding out there that truly helps buy down the cost of special assessments. And unfortunately, Prairie Dog is a non-event. We all had hoped it would happen, but I would assume that the majority of us in North Dakota knew not to budget that was going to actually happen, because chances of us getting any funds, unless there's a huge turnaround for this year, are almost non-existent. So when that funding does come in, if it comes in, that will be a huge help because we plan on using it towards buying down the cost of special assessments and redevelopment and on roads and things like that. But for right now, it's unfortunately, it's not going to come.
Brenda and Dan, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Sorry, I had been problems unmuting. We've got on our arterials, we've got federal monies that will sometimes help with the cost of projects. But due to those being arterials, we're still assessing that capped cost, but it will offset some of those costs. The other thing we have is we do have our sales tax. And so the infrastructure gets about around 6.5 million a year for our capital improvement plan. And that's one of our funding sources that helps budget out our infrastructure projects. We also have funds that come from our water and wastewater to help with any of our sewer projects and our water main projects. And then as Tina alluded to with the cost of oil, they're still filling up buckets, and it'll be questionable what we'll be able to get to. Had we received the allotted amount that was forecasted, then we were looking at buying down specials with those monies.
Tom, is it state funding on the Minnesota side?
We basically don't have anything that would be used for holding down specials. We do have access to some state and federal funding on some of our collector and arterial roadways. We typically have not used that for brand new road construction. That's more been for maintenance of the existing system. So I think when people talk about holding down specials, that's primarily the ones that we're assessing 100% of the cost, which would be the new stuff. And we don't get enough of these funds to be able to apply it to those types of projects. What's more critical for us is to apply it to the underfunded projects, the ones that assessments only cover a small part of the cost, 25 to 30% maybe. We've even had some projects where we can't even hit the 20%, so we can't bond as much as we'd like. And those are ones that we try to package them with a project that has state aid or federal aid money, so there is enough to make it work. So.
Brenda and Dan, I'd like to go back to you for a minute. When we talked about how each municipality special assesses, I know Fargo over the last few years had changed their percentages they charged the homeowner, and then they made some additional changes, and then I don't know if there are some additional changes after the task force last year. Would you talk a little bit about that? And so everyone is aware of what's currently being charged?
On our reconstruction projects, we kept our cap at $40 for water main and sanitary. We've adjusted our paving caps. Are currently on a reconstruction, it's $85 a front foot for a single family dwelling. One of the biggest things we did in our infrastructure policies, we took our multiple family, that used to be one unit, whether it was a duplex all the way up to the megaplexes. So we broke it down into tiers, 4 tiers. Tier 1 is equivalent to a single family. And I believe it's 1 to 3 units. And from 4 to 12 units in tier 2, it bumps up a little bit. And as it progresses, it gets to where the megaplexes are treated much the same way as a commercial entity. Other things we've done in our policy is we've kept everything at a 50-50. We lowered our percentage of bond. We're allowed by state statute to go 1.5% over bond. We dropped ours another 0.25 to 0.75 over bonding. So that should be significant over that. We've also dropped our other fee, and our engineering fees and our admin fees have also come down along with that through the task force.
So Gloria, like you had talked about, is really what happened is to help fund projects and looking at our infrastructure needs. Our infrastructure funding policy in 2016 went to 50-50. So our replacement projects were all being assessed 50-50, 50% by assessment and 50% by city funds. And so as we work through those processes, you know, one of the things we had talked about earlier is in these reconstruction projects, it's nice to have a capped cost because the homeowners really know what to expect. When you do the percentages, we can tell you about what it's going to be, but it's still upon the completion and the certification of that project. And so from the 50-50, there was a lot of communication to our commissioners. We went back to a policy before the 50% split. And so we kind of called it our 2013 policy. So that was the policy before that. And then we kept that policy on board as we went through our task force. And then just at the end of 2019, we presented a new policy that Dan just talked about, and that's going forward.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Next question I have is the special assessment costs have increased exponentially over the past several years. What's driving that cost up? And Tom, we'll start with you on this one.
Okay, thanks. I would say that calling the increase exponential, although that's maybe the way the public views it, I think that is overstating the issue. And when I look at what our assessment costs have been like from 2003 when I started at Moorhead to currently in 2020, we've always looked at the development cost kind of on a per acre basis for a new housing subdivision. So back in 2003, it might have been close to $75,000 per acre to get a full development, including all the trunk and local infrastructure in place. And nowadays it's about 150,000. Okay. Now that's based on the raw acreage and everything. But when you look at that cost increase, okay, it doubles, it sounds like a lot, but over 17 years, that actually amounts to about an increase of 4% a year. That's a little more than when people think of the average inflation, but it's actually about what construction inflation is. And for example, if we look at the Engineering News Record, they have a nationwide data source and they track construction inflation. Over that same time period, the annual average construction inflation was 3.4%. So we're close to that. And so although, you know, the assessments seem to be going up slightly more than that, it's still comparable. I would also say, I think a lot of the cost people see, you know, home values have been going up too. When I compare our building permits for attached housing, because twins are a more consistent size than detached single family. But if you look at twins, our typical twin home in 2005 was just under $100,000 based on building permit value, and it's now about 185,000, which is a little more than a 4% per year annual increase. It's very comparable to what we've been seeing with our special assessment costs. So, you know, yes, the costs are going up, but we do think it's more normal inflation. Understanding that everything adds together and we want affordable housing, you know, back in 2012, we had revised our policy a bit to try to be more flexible with developers and give them more options to try to keep costs lower. So an example of that is, like Fargo had mentioned, they'd reduced their engineering fees. Our engineering fees are down at 11%, which if we hire a consultant to design and do construction admin, I guarantee that's all out the door. So we're not getting anything on that. And so that's as low as we can go with that. Also, we give developers some choices on street widths. It goes to whether or not they want parking, but they can have parking on one side or both sides. They've got a little flexibility in how wide the street can be. There's some options on how sidewalks are installed, things like that. And so, you know, those are options that are out there. Generally, we've found that those things don't have a huge difference in cost, and the developers haven't really gone for them, because you might lower your street cost by 1 or 2%, but taking 2 feet off the width of a street in our neighborhood with the amount of snow we get, you know, people are a lot happier with that extra width, foot or two of width on the street, really, when it comes to the winters. So as a result, most developers have not opted to use some of those possibilities.
Thanks. Tina, would you like to go next, please?
Well, as far as the increase in special assessment costs, I agree with Tom on it. There's inflation, and inflation is a factor. What we have done in West Fargo is, because they're cognizant of the fact that people are, you know, don't like special assessments, we have implemented standard items that are included in a special assessment district, and that if a developer wants to go over and above that, and if they want any of that included in the assessment district, they have to come before the city commission and request it. And the commission has to actually approve it. Even if they're the one that owns, before it used to be, you own all the land. If you want to put in a fence, we'll allow that in there. If you want to, we'd allow other things in there. We don't do that anymore, because then once it's all spread out, then people get very upset. So in that stance, we are working to fine tune what can actually be in a special assessment district to help kind of keep those costs down. A couple other things, we are also utilizing sales tax. So like I said, we don't have a lot, but we're going to be utilizing that. And just working with the developers and the public to try and find that happy medium that you get. For us in West Fargo, our biggest problem is that we've doubled in size in like 15 years. And so every single road needed to be built or rebuilt, expanded, widened. And so all of those costs to the people on the south end of town hit all at once, where normally in a growing community, it takes time. And so they don't all hit at once. And so people, when they complain, I have all these special assessments on my property, it's because the south end of our town has exploded in such a short period of time, and there was no other way to fund it. We don't have any magic pot of money. We got federal, state grant, whatever we could get, we used, but at the end of the day, back when the south part of town started to explode, we had just initiated sales tax, and that was to pay for the 9th Street overpass, the Veterans Avenue overpass. It was for nothing else. And so that's part of the hardship that the people see in West Fargo when they say their specials are high on that end of town. It's a brand new part of town, and it's unfortunate. You know, thank God we're finally maybe running out of roads that we have to widen. Now that Cheyenne Street's done, let's hope we can knock on wood, but that's part of the issue for us.
Tina, you said the developers have to petition for certain amenities. Can you give us examples of those, what they have to petition for?
Yes, they would have to come before the commission. Let's say they want a fence around their development, or for example, they want we have a standard street light that should be covered by a special assessment city standard. If they want to go to a higher end one, or if they want to add park-like amenities into their subdivision that are for just their subdivision, additional things like that, additional dirt. Let's say they've got really low spots in large areas and they want to haul in a lot of dirt. That's normally a lot cost for afterwards, but they can petition the commission and ask them to have that included.
Thank you. Brenda and Dan, would you like to add anything?
I agree with Tom. The costs of construction go up annually, as do the cost of everything else. That is one of the things that I really, when we use cap costs for reconstruction, what that allows us to do is equalize the cost of those projects from year to year to the citizens. And so let's say there is a roadway that maybe is more complicated than the road next to it. Those people aren't getting an increased cost just because there was it was a more difficult type project. And so by utilizing those cap costs on the reconstruction projects, that allows us to get that equalization on those assessments from year to year to the property owners. And then, like we had talked in Greenfields, that's really, we're just assessing whatever those costs are. And so just like West Fargo, we have a restriction, I guess I call it a restriction of, we assess the roadways, the sewer, water and storm sewer, and the street lights. And then the other thing we do is we do install the side yard sidewalks for those corner properties. So those are the things that you'll see incorporated into our projects. Anything above that is always done by the developer. And then this year, as part of that special assessment task force, because there's a lot of property in the south side of Fargo that is in our floodplain, we used to assess the cost of lowering, which is taking that land out of the floodplain. So that fill that was used to take it out, that was a cost that was being special assessed. That is now being paid by the developer.
Thank you. I guess we can start taking questions at this point. I haven't seen any questions pop up yet. Tina has to leave in a few minutes, but if anyone has any additional questions, and as we wait for those questions to come up, if you have any additional information you'd like to add from any one of the cities. You can just jump in at any point and share information. Waiting for questions. I haven't gotten any.
So I think, Maria, we'd like to, I'll have Dan jump in. We've got a whole section on our city website with special assessments. And then why don't you talk about some of the other information we have online too.
Our infrastructure policies online and available for anybody's viewing. We also strongly suggest if you have questions about your special assessments, go to fargoparcels.com, plug in either your parcel ID or your address, and there's a whole list. You can go from our assessors, from your property taxes, all the way through the special assessment process to see what's out there on your parcels and what projects are there currently and work in progress.
Thank you. And Tom, do you have similar information available?
Yeah, we keep information. So there's property information. If you go to the city website, you can look up a parcel and find out assessment information on it. And also we have a special assessment coordinator, Amy Weigel. She's really good at what she does. She takes care of all of our special assessments, and you know, she's got all that information that people would need to know. You know, for example, one of the things that Moorhead does, a common complaint on specials is the interest rate. And, you know, people can pay off specials early. They don't have to follow the amortization schedule that's there. And they don't have to pay it all off at one shot either. So like our finance department is pretty flexible. As long as you pay at least 100, you know, they don't want you to pay just a tiny dollar amount, but if you have a $10,000 assessment, you know, and you want to pay it off in 10 years instead of the 20 or 25, you can do that. And whatever you pay prior to November 15th of any given year can be reduced from the principal, and we'll recalculate what the remaining specials are before certifying it to the county for payment through the property taxes. And so typically if it's a small special assessment, like when we have an area-wide assessment for collector and arterial roads, those are a $500 assessment. We get a lot of people that say, why on earth would I let that go on to my taxes for 25 years and pay interest on it? So people will usually pay those off. The larger ones, they'll tend to let stay on the taxes, but we'll work with people on what works best for them.
Thank you. Tina, do you have any thoughts on that?
We do the same type of thing. We encourage people to make payments on their special assessments in any amount that they want to, if they so choose. I'm not exactly remembering what the initial question was, but it's just been one of those days.
I think it goes back to, do you have policies online so we could go out
Yes.
and review, and the city of Fargo has theirs online?
Yes, I was so intently listening to Tom, I totally blanked on the question. Yes, if you go to westfargond.gov, on our website, we have, through our assessing portal, we have the same type of database that Brenda and Tom were talking about, where you can go in and you can put in whether it's your address or whatever, and pull up, it'll bring up all your parcel data information, and then at the bottom, it gets into your special assessments, and it will show current special assessments and pending potential special assessments. And then there's contact information there as well. If you go into our special assessment portion of our website, all of our policies and procedures are there. We're updating our procedure for special assessments, starting from the beginning project level when we first bring a project forward, all the way through to the special assessment portion of it. So that will be coming out shortly, but all that information is found there. And in fact, we're adding to our website, we're going to start putting out all of our special assessments, all of our lists, all of our public information, so that we're trying to create an app so people can search for pending specials and things like that right from our main website as well. So we're working on it, so keep checking it.
I know you have to scoot off here shortly, But just one last question of you, and then if you have any last things you'd like to add. I know that you had recently had a change. You used to use a third-party engineering firm, and you may still do that, but the contact information has changed for that. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, our contact if you have a question on the allocation of your special assessments or how it's done, you would contact our city engineering office. If you call our main phone number, which is 433-5300, they'll be able to get you to the right person to help you with all your questions. And or if you go on our website, there's emails specifically for assessments from the website that will get to the right person, and then they can respond to your questions. So.
Okay, thank you. Tina, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Yes.
I appreciate your expertise and your knowledge and your input on our panel. So
thank you for inviting me. And if anyone has further questions or comments, please feel free to reach out.
Okay, anything else you have for us today before you go?
No, just if people aren't sure of the process, aren't sure of why things are done the way they are, I encourage them to reach out to the different municipalities and ask the questions, because otherwise we get these false ideas out there of what's going on. They think that we're over assessing. They think that, you know, like just like Fargo and Moorhead, we've got a small administration fee. We've lowered it. We charge out engineering based on what it costs us. I mean, we're not trying to pad our budgets and our funds. So if people have questions or they're not quite sure, I just encourage them to reach out to each community and get the answers to the questions and listen, because we all just want to do what's best for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
I'm not getting any questions. So Brenda and Dan, do you have any closing thoughts or anything else you would like to add?
You know, and unfortunately, special assessments is not always a fun word. But as we try and make improvements and keep up with the roadways, you know, we have a lot of mill and overlay projects and maintenance type projects to try and minimize or try and extend their life as long as we can. And so, and unfortunately, as these projects come up, there's a cost associated with them. And so I think through our task force, we learned a lot of things by going through our special assessment task force. So we have been working on a lot of improvements, just working on our communication with the property owners and trying to get out in front of them sooner than later, so they know things are coming. We've worked on a 4-year capital improvement plan, so you can look out into the future and see if any of your roadway networks are on that plan. And so we are trying to take a lot of that input we've got from the task force and try and implement what we can. We aren't able to implement everything, but we are able to take a lot of those lessons we learned from there and try and even just viewing it through different eyes. And so I think that's really helped us going forward. And I don't know if you have anything, Dan?
I think that was one of the task force biggest eye openers for our department was transparency. All the information's always been there. And it's always at our disposal, and now we're opening up to where anybody can access what we access. And we're working on some things. On our notices have been changing. Our format on fargoparcels.com, we've expanded that so you can see what the project's all about. You don't get the project number; it has an explanation. So the transparency is a real value for the homeowner. We want to educate everybody as much as we know, and we'll give you the most information we have at the time. And if you have any questions, please feel free to call our office.
Thank you. Tom, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I guess I think I would, one other thing I'd say regarding special assessments, we know the public generally hates them. We actually hate them too. It creates a lot of work for us. And generally nobody likes them, so they associate us with specials. They don't really like us very much. And so we don't like using them, but it's a tool that we need to use. The alternative, if we didn't have special assessments at all, is going to be, well, for a new development, the developer will have to pay the cost, and ultimately, you know, the home buyer pays it anyway. For rehab and reconstruct projects, our only alternative would be a significant increase in the city's general property tax levy, because that is the only other source of funding we have. And so what the special assessments allows us to do is to bond and spread that over time. And so ultimately people still pay for it, but it gets spread over time. And then I would add one other, if there's one thing I could say from my perspective that's a benefit to specials, is it puts a little bit of skin in the game for the residents. So if we're doing a rehab project on a street, every year I get a few calls. I don't get a lot of them, but I get a few calls where someone says, my street is really bad. I want you to do something about it. And I'll say, well, you know, hey, it's in our 5-year plan. We're going to do it in a few years. Just so you know, there is special assessments and your share will be $2,000. And they'll go, what? It's not that bad. I don't want you to do my street. So if they don't think they have to pay some money for it, their street is terrible and they want it done. But once they find out, even if it's only 20% or 30% of the share of the cost, they're not so eager to see it done if they have a cost to it. And so it does kind of it helps to throttle back expectations. Otherwise, everybody would think, I've already paid my property taxes for it. I want a brand new street. So if there's anything good about specials, I think that would be it.
Okay, thank you. Well, I haven't received any questions, so obviously all of your panelists did an excellent job in explaining how your city handles special assessments and some of the changes you've implemented over the last few years. So I want to thank you once again for joining us and for spending your time with us today to help educate us. We really do appreciate it. All right. Thank you so much. I guess we'll close.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.